Hello, my name is Matthew McKee, and I am an undergraduate student at Dalhousie University here in Halifax. And this is my Stormwater report for Sustainability 3102. For my project, I'd like to talk about erosion caused by stormwater that I witnessed firsthand on Hermans Island here in Nova Scotia. So just to get started, before we get too involved, I'd just like to talk about the history of Hermans Island. So Hermans Island is located here in Lunenburg County in Nova Scotia. Hermans Island is predominantly home to many summer cottages owned by people who live all around the world. And by my count, I think there are 48 cottages on Hermans Island, with only 2 of them being winterized and lived in year-round. The island is also home to the Lunenburg Yacht Club, which has a restaurant, sailing school, public space, and is host to many large sailing regattas. And every summer, it seems as though there is at least one property being redeveloped into a multi-million-dollar cottage. And the reason I included that last point there, I just wanted to highlight the fact that the island, when I was growing up, was originally just a bunch of small little cabins and family-owned places. But every year, it seems that there are people coming in from overseas or even from out west in Canada with quite a bit of money, and they're building these giant places right next to the water's edge, which won't bode well for sea level rise. And I just thought I'd mention that, even though the report's on stormwater. So next we can jump right in and talk about the road where the erosion due to stormwater happened. The road in question is the Hermans Island North Side Road, which is one of 3 roads on Hermans Island and one of the unpaved roads, which doesn't really get taken care of in the winter, and which is kind of okay because there's no traffic or no cars that would come down this road in the winter because no one lives here. And as the name says, it's located on the north side of the island, the north side of Hermans Island being the side that faces toward Mahone Bay. Hermans Island Road is approximately 400 meters long and starts at the main road on the island and ends in a cul-de-sac about 400 meters later. The north side road has driveways for 8 cottages and features a ditch on both sides of the road that seldom contain a large amount of water. So just to talk about some of the photos here that I've included on this slide. The first picture is just a sign saying that the Hermans Island North Side Road is on the right and the South Side Road's on the left. That's kind of the only marking for the road, as everyone who lives on the road knows where it is, and there's not many tourists that need to drive down this road. The other 3 pictures on the right are just pictures I included of the road itself. And the bottom left picture is a picture of the top of our driveway to our cottage, which has a wooden sign with a sailboat on it that my dad handmade when he was younger and says McKee. So I just thought I would kind of include that for a little bit of a personal touch in the presentation. So now I'd like to jump in and start talking about the different areas where I've seen erosion on the island. And I kind of like to preface this slide by saying that many islands in Mahone Bay and Lunenburg County have suffered from erosion, both from the ocean and from heavy rainfall and stormwater in the past couple of years. So the main photo in the top left corner is a picture of our neighbor's deck. And I took that picture 2 years ago. And the deck collapsed because the earth under one of the legs just totally washed away after a heavy rain, and the deck just got ripped off the front of their cottage, which is a real shame because 3 years later it's still there. But for this report, I'd really like to bring our focus back to the North Side Road, where back in 2016, part of it collapsed. So in the early part of 2016, when we came down to the cottage one spring day, we noticed that part of the North Side Road had been washed away where an old culvert had been. You can see a picture of that in the bottom left-hand corner. And the only reason this culvert was there was to bring water from one side of the road to the other so that the rainwater could flow down a little ravine and eventually get to the ocean. And my dad theorized that this was probably... I shouldn't say my dad. My dad and I theorized that this was probably due to the large amount of snow and rainfall that we had received earlier in the spring. And we thought that this increased amount of precipitation would have put extra stress on the metal culvert and would have eroded the earth surrounding it, just weakening the whole structure of the road and washing things out. The other pictures here are in the top right. We have our neighbor's cottage, which is sitting on the edge of a cliff, which has slowly been eaten away by the sea and just rainwater and is slowly about to wash out the back corner of their cottage. The middle picture is a picture of my car, which I took the other day, and that's just on the other road on the island, and you can see just the rainwater and stormwater on the left has almost created a ditch, I would say, where the dirt's just being washed all the way down the hill. And the last picture of interest on this slide is the picture directly on the bottom, which is a picture of 3 trees that had their bases eroded where all the roots are, and they fell over about a month ago actually onto the power lines. So we still do not have any cell phone service, or I should say landline service, at our cottage, which I thought was kind of interesting. So now I just kind of like to take a moment and talk about the problem itself and our homemade and short-term solution compared to the county's long-term and permanent solution. So our first homemade solution to the road was try and fill it up and repair it ourselves. So to do this, we tried pouring buckets of rock and dirt to try and replenish the area of the road that had washed away. You can kind of see that in the top 4 pictures there. We then added some trees and sticks just to notify drivers who were driving by that, hey, there's kind of a hole here and you should really try and stay away or not drive on the road at all, just because it may be at risk of collapsing. But we soon realized that the dirt and the rocks that we had added were no help at all, and that the earth we had been using continued to be washed out and flow down the creek underneath the road toward the ocean. So our next step was to contact Susan Lones-Croft, who's the local MLA for Lunenburg County, and ask for her help. Luckily, she was able to call us back and email us back and direct us to the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation, who came a few weeks later to fix the road. So I've included a picture of Susan Lones-Croft there on the right in the red. And after an evaluation from the Nova Scotia Department of Transportation, they concluded that the metal culvert should be removed and replaced with a newer plastic one. So to do this, the workers had to dig up the section of the road that had collapsed, backfill it, and install a new culvert. So in the next slide, I'll be talking about the costing of that, and I'll also break it down and talk about where the costs come from. The last thing I'd like to do here is kind of take a moment and talk about why I think our road was fixed so quickly. So I personally think that we were really lucky to have the road fixed in such a short amount of time, because especially in the winter and spring, Hermans Island is a pretty quiet place with not too many visitors. However, the North Side Road has 2 full-time residents who live on it, and it kind of serves as a secondary road to the Lunenburg Yacht Club. So I think these 2 aspects proved both important for the MLA and the Department of Transportation, because they hoped to fix the problem as quickly as possible before it got any worse. And they really didn't want to have to limit people's access to the yacht clubs or to their homes. So in the bottom 4 pictures here, the photos are of the new black plastic culvert that's been installed. And if you can see, they actually redid part of the road they re-graveled it and covered it with new rocks, and actually extended the black pipe out so it wouldn't undermine and wash out what was underneath the road, so hopefully it won't collapse for another couple of years. Now for the costs. When doing a cost estimation, you need to look at what needs to happen and the resources needed to complete the task. Once we do that, we are able to calculate the cost of these resources and the overall cost of the job. Luckily, my father owns a landscape architecture company in Halifax, and he was able to help me with finding some of the costs to complete a job like this. So the first step, before replacing the pipe, the Department of Transportation would need to hire 2 laborers, 1 foreman, and rent 1 backhoe and a dump truck. I assumed that they'd be able to get the job done in one long day, or roughly 10 hours. This is what I used for the basis of my cost estimation. I first found that the average cost of the truck and the backhoe was around $100 per hour for each one. The 2 laborers were $50 per hour each, and the foreman was around $50 an hour. This means that it costs approximately $3,300 for the day to cover the rental and wage costs. The next step would be to dig a hole for the new culvert to go into. The hole needs to be approximately 5 feet deep with 1-to-1 angles. And all this means is that to replace the 2-foot wide pipe at the bottom, the hole would need to be 4 feet wide at the bottom and around 12 feet wide at the top. The corrugated culvert pipe that is used costs approximately $30 a foot and is 35 feet long so that it can go under the whole width of the road. Thus, the new culvert pipe itself would cost roughly $1,000. The pipe then needs to be covered and surrounded with type 1 gravels and tampled down every foot to ensure the gravel is compacted enough so that the pipe will not be crushed when cars drive down the road. After estimating the size of the hole, it was found that the volume of it was around 1,100 cubic feet. This is after I had subtracted the volume of the culvert. This is equivalent to 41 cubic yards of type 1 gravel with a weight of 73 tons. With an average cost of $30 per ton, the gravel to infill the hole would cost around $2,100. Adding all of these costs together, we can estimate that the total cost to rip up the old culvert, replace it, and fix the road is kind of in the ballpark of $6,500. At first, this may seem like a lot, but the future damages that would have encountered the road would have been much more had they not fixed the culvert and the erosion had continued. So the Department of Transportation, I think, did a really good job, and the work around the culvert looks the same as it did 3 years ago when they first installed it. Thus, after doing a personal cost-benefit calculation, I think that the Department of Transportation made the right decision in replacing the culvert to help divert the stormwater. So now I just want to talk about clear cutting, which in my opinion is another opinion which kind of plagues the residents of Hermans Island and the island itself. So just to start, Hermans Island 5 years ago used to be full of trees, but because of all the new developments and things like that, people have started to clear cut and cut down a bunch of trees on their property. But one of the major issues with our drain, or that affected the culvert under the road, is that the people who own the middle part of the island started clear cutting all of their trees because I think they might have ran into some financial trouble, and they used the wood and sold it as firewood. But the trees in the center of the island created shade for the forest floor and made the air cooler due to the tree respiration. This helped with the development of smaller wetlands that formed within the middle of the island. When the trees were removed in the clear-cutting effort, it made the surrounding air hotter and drier, leading to the evaporation of these wetlands that were home to many different native species. So I actually was able to kind of go back and find a picture from a couple years ago, which is the picture in the bottom right here, of what the middle of the island used to look like. So it was wet, and there was marsh area with ferns growing and quite muddy, but it helped to retain a lot of the rainfall and soil so that it wasn't just immediately running into the roads and their ditches and things like that and causing erosion. So just like I said, the tree roots also help to bind the soil together and create areas for the water to soak into the earth. And so because of this, I've noticed firsthand that the rainfall that the island experiences is quickly able to make its way from the higher elevated forest areas to the ditches next to the road on the island. This is worrying, as the increased amount of fast-moving stormwater could cause further and more severe erosion both to the road, ditch, and other areas of the island. So if it wasn't clear enough already, the top 2 pictures on the right there on the slide are pictures that I was able to take last week of the clear cutting that's been taking place in the middle of the island. So just in the last part of the presentation here, I just want to talk about kind of where the water goes after it goes through the culvert and who are the other stakeholders and other residents of the island who are affected. So obviously, just to start off, water flows from always wants to flow from higher elevations to lower elevations until it eventually reaches the ocean or a lake. So after draining through the new culvert that they put in, the water then flows down a little ravine, denoting the property line between two cottages until it gets to the ocean on the north side of Hermans Island. I took a picture of the ravine there, and that's up in the top left corner. So as you can see, there's the ravine's a small little river right down the middle with two fairly steep banks on both sides with quite a few trees on them. So upon first glance, it's one of these. It seems fine, but over the last 100 years, the constant flow of water from the road and higher parts of the island has eroded the ravine and caused these steep banks on each side. But now with the increased flow of water under the road, it's causing the sides of the ravine to erode even faster, putting sheds, power poles, and trees at risk of being washed down the bank. So that brings me to the second picture there. As you can see, there's kind of a shed which is white, and it's about 10 feet back from the top of the ravine. A few years ago, it was 20 feet back, so it has eroded quite a bit since they've put in the new culvert that goes under the road. So personally, for me to try and combat the road of erosion, I had suggested the idea to our family who owns the land around the ravine to try and plant some small spruce saplings in hopes that their roots may help to stabilize the earth on the side of the banks. So that you can see more of in the bottom picture, the kind of bottom picture in the right. You can see there's 4 or 5 spruce trees that I had planted right along the edge of the ravine, kind of hoping that it would stabilize the earth and not let that soil erode away into the ravine as quickly. And the picture, the tall, skinny picture on the left there, is a picture of older trees that have slowly been falling down the bank as the earth underneath of them just gets washed out and there's nothing to support them. So they fall over. So in summary, I'd just like to start off by saying that I think the fix by the Department of Transportation was the correct solution, as it stopped the road from collapsing and suffering any more damage in the short term. But I think in more recent years, with the amount of new construction and clear cutting and new developments that have gone on the island, that I think that the new culvert may not have been the best solution, as it leads to an increase in erosion as more water is easily able to move to lower elevations, and i.e. like down the ravine. So to combat this, I think there should be more culverts installed underneath the road in different locations. This would help disperse the water and not make the effects of the erosion as severe. I think that this is economically attainable, as the values of the people's properties would sustain larger damage costs due to what the new culvert would cost to reroute stormwater. And additionally, I think more measures could be taken by homeowners to kind of help replant trees and plant more vegetation in areas of the island that had previously been clear cut. Just like I talked about in the clear cutting slide, this would additionally help decrease the amount of water that is easily able to get to the culvert in the first place and cause erosion. Thank you for listening to my presentation on Stormwater for Sustainability 3102. I took the beautiful photo here in the background off the end of our wharf on Hermans Island earlier this week. And I hope I was able to use my personal experiences to teach you something about stormwater and erosion. Thank you.